everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Wildcard Day. That's where we look at things a little bit different from our regular cast of artists that we see during the week. So a few reviews back, I looked at Spider-Man and Wolverine issue number 1. Today we're looking at issue number 2, dated August 2025. I rarely look at modern comics, but of course, as I mentioned last issue, Carrie Andrews is one of those guys who today is channeling some of the stuff that I really love from back when I was a kid from the 90s and is doing a really good job of it. So I'm more than willing to splurge for the insane prices comic books are at now for single issues. And I'm kind of glad to see, I looked ahead, I saw an ad for something, I think issue 8 of Spider-Man and Wolverine, I could be wrong on that, but issue 7 and 8, where they're introducing a new character that's like an amalgamation of Spider-Man and Wolverine, which again seems crazy and over the top, but also very 90s. So there's really something about this title that I'm liking more and more. The first issue was pretty darn good. The art was awesome. And issue 2 is no different. So we're going to be looking at that today because, again, of Carrie Andrews and his 90s inspired art. As you can see right away on the cover here, right? Tons of webbing from Spider-Man. Definitely the Todd McFarlane version of Spider-Man that Carrie Andrews has taken inspiration here from. The really big eyes, you know, the rips in the costume and all that stuff. Very 90s. The just gobs of webbing all over the place. Kind of gross, but kind of cool at the same time. And he also applies that kind of aesthetic to Wolverine here. Not quite doing the McFarlane Wolverine. Maybe doing more of just what we expect from Wolverine. The stocky build, you know. The classic Wolverine, but with kind of a McFarlane aesthetic. I will say that as we go through the interior art, I feel like maybe there's a bit of deadline-itis setting in where Carrie Andrews pulls back just a little bit on that noodly kind of inking that McFarlane does, right? I think what he does, instead of, you know, where McFarlane kind of uses the extra noodling in the art to fill it up and make it very detailed, but not necessarily define volume or form. There's no specific reason for some of it being there. I feel like Carrie Andrews is channeling that same aesthetic, that same type of line, but applying it to conveying a sense of volume and using it properly. So there's a lot more open space all throughout than maybe what you would see typically from McFarlane in the volumes of the bodies and other elements and stuff like that. Pretty cool, just close up, you know, violent kind of confrontation between Wolverine and Spider-Man, and of course that is what we are to expect in this issue as well. I also like, I kind of see it here, I feel like he's taken I'll call it the Rob Liefeld calf muscle, like how Liefeld used to draw it in like the early 90s where the calf was just huge and then the rest of the leg was very tiny. I feel like he's channeling a bit of that here and all throughout the comic, especially with Spider-Man. With his anatomy, it seems to work and make sense. But just to the nth degree and foreshortening it and honestly just being a little more successful than Liefeld at conserving those proportions at different angles. I'll point that out as I go through. I know that's a weird detail, but those are the kind of things I notice as an artist. So last issue, if you saw the review, I'll just clue you in. Spider-Man sees a video that kind of seems to lead him to think that Wolverine is responsible for the death of his parents, having their plane crash somehow. And of course now the fight between Spider-Man and Wolverine ensues. Not a lot of backgrounds in these pages, although because it's a lot of action sequences, he could be forgiven for that. But again, see how the more open style overall already kind of apparent here. Not quite as much noodling on the figures, although the art is still stellar. And you'll see all throughout that I feel like there's a bit of that deadline mindset, and as far as how much detail there is and the backgrounds. Okay, when there are backgrounds, obviously, you know, they're there to convey what they need to, and I don't feel like he's cheaping out on it. I will say he clearly spent a lot of time on this one. Again, we just saw this recently with an X-Force review, right, with Greg Capullo, the early 90s. This is a typical early 90s thing, double page spread, but or double page splash rather, but where you have to turn the book vertically to get a look at it. So very 90s to me. And again, I just like seeing these little, there's a combination of, it's really Rob Liefeld and McFarlane kind of mixed together in his depiction of Spider-Man. This is what I mean about the big calf and the very small leg at the bottom, and then how he foreshortens it just is hilarious to me. He's got that exaggerated McFarlane foot. Just really cool figure work. You know, it's taking what McFarlane does, but making it work, and it almost feels more kind of kinetic and almost more like manga in that way. Not as far as the aesthetic of the lines, but as far as the positioning and the movement and stuff. And Wolverine looks great, right? I kind of wish they would use a more 90s costume. This costume with the stripes, I mean, it's almost like the yellow costume, but they don't have the underwear, right? The blue underwear, the classic yellow-blue costume. I would prefer, and even then, I would prefer the tan costume. But if I'm not mistaken, I think next issue he's gonna have it on, so they're gonna play around with that stuff. So I'm cool with accepting this version of his costume for now, as hopefully it's gonna be changing at least a couple of times during the series. What a great double page splash, good stuff. So Mark Guggenheim is the writer. Artist is Carrie Andrews, of course. Color artist Brian Reber, and letterer Travis Lanham. Color-wise, I think I mentioned sometimes I feel like in the first issue maybe some of the coloring would obscure stuff a little bit. I feel like in this issue as well, just like the art, it's been toned down a little bit and things are a little bit easier to read and clearer overall. Not getting as much of these kind of effects, which I don't mind sometimes when things are too glowy. I know that's a weird way to describe it, but I feel like it gets, in some instances with the lens flare and stuff, it gets kind of hard to look at in a weird way. And again, I'm talking about the manga influence. Like, how is that not a manga panel right there? Really well done. And that, you know, that visual cue of the impact of the punch here, right, is straight out of manga. And here's a sequence once again. We saw last issue of Wolverine on the plane with Spider-Man, Peter Parker's parents. Got some background work here on these shots, which is well done. And then again, just a little bit to show you the industrial site they were in from last issue. But yeah, just not a lot of backgrounds all throughout. I thought this was interesting. I don't know if I've ever seen this, where you're so up close to Spider-Man that you kind of see his eye through the Spider-Man visor eye. I thought that was a nice touch there. Very cool. And how is that not literally a McFarlane pose, right? Down here, another good example, that one too, but again, of him twisting the angle and using those big calved, short, I mean, thin-legged Liefeld thighs, not thighs, excuse me, I'm really getting confused here. The way Liefeld draws calves in the early 90s that I kind of like and I find kind of fun, kind of inspired probably from the proportions of Fists of the North Star. I always felt like there was a bit of a vibe there, but he's twisting them in different angles and drawing them from different angles, so it's just hilarious to me how huge those calves are. But Carrie Andrews really successful at like every angle depicting those same calves. I'm really focusing on a funny detail, but there's something about it. See? Right here. Love those calves. I mean, he's really successful with this action sequence because it's pretty much the whole issue, and it's just every panel moves and every panel has something interesting in it. So here we see the sequence where the plane is to crash, so it's not clearly stated, right, whether Wolverine's responsible for it or not. You know, in the storyline, Spider-Man is kind of accusing him of having been an agent for the Red Skull, and that's who ordered the hit on his parents, right? And Wolverine basically says, you know, my memory's spotty. I wish I could tell you exactly. He's like, I remember being there. I remember being on the plane. I remember the plane crashing. So he's, you know, even Wolverine can't really 100%. He says he was a double agent, right? Working for the Red Skull. So those extra levels of secrecy, right? And double crosses, but just doesn't remember exactly if he's responsible for their death or not. This I thought I wasn't quite sure what was going on, right? So it's a little bit obscure to me, the background behind these shots, but you got a bit of Wolverine here, and I assume that's the back of Spider-Man's head. So just an odd kind of slightly abstract panel, even though we get the Wolverine silhouette. Kind of fun. Just confused me at first. The dot pattern is a nice touch as well. So here's where last issue Spider-Man saw the footage. Kind of convenient, right? That Red Skull is just always filming himself and everything he does and all of his agents and stuff. What a great shot of Spider-Man there, and lots of moody lighting and shadow just to make him look very menacing. And, you know, he's really pissed off here. He thinks Wolverine killed his parents. You know, he would be. And this is somewhere where I wasn't quite sure what I was looking at here. Spider-Man clearly punching Wolverine, but I was like, is that his fist? But then I saw the red here, so I can see his arm kind of going through. It's very manga once again, lots of movement. It looks cool. It's these bits here, these added light streaks sometimes and speed lines in the foreground, where I wonder about the color. You know, maybe if that was drawn in to the art rather than just colored in. Something about it that just, there's a disconnect between the two that kind of annoys me. But yeah, to get back to this, so I wasn't quite sure what exactly was going on with Wolverine's face. And I'm like, is that his jaw just kind of being almost fully ripped off or punched off? So I wasn't quite sure. And you know, sometimes when a panel is obscure and you're not quite sure what's going on, there can still be a cool payoff to it. And it's kind of done on purpose, which I feel is what Carrie Andrews did here. Here's a nice bit of coloring in the sequence, right? That makes it nice and moody and makes the fire kind of seem more evocative. See, that's where modern coloring kind of works for me. And yeah, just to turn this page, and like, it's kind of hilarious, but also super awesome to see Wolverine there with his tongue hanging out and his jaw like clearly broken and hanging off his face there. And then, you know, getting this shot where he almost looks like Venom, just very exaggerated. I love everything that Carrie Andrews is doing here. Looks awesome. I mean, it's the most extreme it could be, busting out of the fire and stuff. This is another cool page. I love the sequence where Wolverine, Spider-Man's shooting web bullets, I guess, for lack of a better term, at Wolverine, and Wolverine just swatting them away and cutting them away with his blades. We get the close-up shot here of Spider-Man as if we're Wolverine, the point of view, all the extra hands, right, because he's moving them around. There's kind of a Matrix feel here, right, and just the extreme foreshortening of those Spider-Man bullets coming towards you. Very Matrixy, very cool. And then this shot of Wolverine slicing at Spider-Man, just kind of cutting off the top of his mask and the hair coming out. That's just a really cool visual idea that works really well here. Again, very action-packed, amazing foreshortening, just movement all across the page. But again, these lines that kind of come in, a lot of flair. This is the stuff that kind of just hurts my eyes a little bit, I guess. I hate to describe it that way, but like, have the lens flare and stuff, just a bit too much, I feel. But, you know, that's down to personal taste. I do think the colors overall are pretty darn good in this book. And yeah, I mean, listen, the whole issue is pretty much, again, Wolverine kicking the shit out of Spider-Man, Spider-Man kicking the shit out of Wolverine. This shot's pretty cool where he lunges at him and Spider-Man just flattens out because, you know, he's Wolverine's a little more of a bruiser. You know, he's athletic, but not necessarily, you know, flexible, and not a gymnast, right? More of a bruiser. And Spider-Man's definitely more of a gymnast and very, you know, agile and flexible and stuff. So that comes across in their movement and their body language all the way throughout, right? Wolverine's always kind of crouched and stocky. Spider-Man's always in the air and bent over and stuff. So, and just the battle damage, again, I feel like McFarlane is probably the first guy to do that kind of broken glass kind of vibe, or almost webbing, breaking Spider-Man's eye, or at least the eye of his mask. So more McFarlane influence there. Oh, did I miss? Sorry, there's just something I thought was really cool. Yeah, down here. So the snap, and okay, so you can see that Wolverine's basically just reset his jaw and he can talk again. I thought that was a nice little touch in the storytelling. So yeah, Spider-Man's got Wolverine webbed down. He's just punching the shit out of him. Of course, eventually Wolverine's gonna just, you know, in this case, I'm assuming he's going into a berserker rage. It's probably been a while, but, you know, just not gonna stand for that anymore. And just these two close-ups again. That glary lighting is just a bit much for me here. A little bit too much. Kind of an homage to the you know, Wolverine with the Hulk face in there, but you got Spider-Man here, that classic McFarlane cover. Not the exact angle or anything, but definitely a reference to that, I guess is what I'll say. Really cool, and both of these definitely very manga inspired to me. And again, I just feel like if these lines were actually drawn and inked in, I'd like it a little bit better. I feel it had like the effect that you're going for works better when you do it that way than when you just throw in these light kind of colored lines on top. Should be more of them too, for my taste. And then, boom, surprise, Wolverine actually slices through Spider-Man's stomach here. And that's how they leave us on that cliffhanger for this issue. And we got a preview here of Spider-Man. Oh, it just says Wolverine #3. I get what they're doing there. Obviously, Spider-Man's going to die, right? Probably not. And yeah, so again, the preview of the tan suit for next issue, and Spider-Man in his black costume. So definitely a 90s vibe here, you know, with the dinosaur in the back. They're probably going to the Savage Land, I'm going to assume. So, you know, tinges of that Mike Mignola book, Jungle Adventure, from the late 80s, early 90s. That's really good, with Wolverine, featuring Wolverine in the Savage Land. And Modern Comics, it feels like the paper on the inside is pretty much the same thickness as the cover. Am I wrong on that? Anyone out there buying modern comics? Maybe the cover's a little bit thicker, but it's a little bit odd to me. There's a tactile quality of comics that just to me is weird when the cover and the interior pages have about the same feel. Maybe it's a little bit thicker. Comment on that in the comments below if you feel like it. All right, guys, that is it. That is my review of Spider-Man and Wolverine issue number 2. If you are still watching, guys, and you are subscribed to the channel, thank you so much for your loyal support. I really do appreciate it. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second for you. It really helps the channel out. It helps us grow, and it helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. If you're interested in the comics that I make, Big Baby and STARCRASHER, let me know. Message me, and we'll sort that out for you. So everyone, once again, thank you for watching, and have an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents STARCRASHER one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.